In total, Chopin composed 21 nocturnes, and each of them is a piece of art on its own, so I can totally recommend to listen to the full collection of nocturnes and also compare different interpretations of different musicians. That's something that I like to do when I'm studying a piece for a longer while and I just want to get some fresh inspiration. So I like to go on Apple Music Classical and just listen through all the different renditions of the same piece. Now you saw that Chopin was composing in many forms that already existed, like nocturnes, mazurka, polonaise, etudes, and many, many others. But what many people do not know is that he also invented, or kind of invented, a new form, at least for piano solo, which had a big impact on the music scene. Now, as I said, it was not new, but it was at least new enough. The ballades as an instrumental piece. These are not the typical vocal ballades, which have already existed before. These are ballades without words, which is, by the way, the original title that Chopin gave these pieces, but nowadays everyone is just calling them ballades. These pieces are ballades instrumental piece. These are not the typical vocal ballades, which have already existed before. These are ballades without words, which is, by the way, the original title that Chopin gave these pieces, but nowadays everyone is just calling them ballades. These pieces are telling a story without using one single word. Since this form didn't exist before, Chopin was very free in the way that he composed these ballades. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go through each and every piece that Chopin composed, but if you are interested to learn more about Chopin's compositions, you should definitely check out the work pages on Apple Music Classical, where you'll find little introductions to many of the compositions of a lot of different composers, but in this case of Chopin, which I think is always very insightful because you're listening and simultaneously reading a little bit about it. Okay, let's talk about love. Chopin's relationship with the writer Georges Sand was a major part of his life. Their time together brought out a lot of his emotional and introspective side in his music. Now, since Chopin had some severe health issues, the couple decided to go to Mallorca, hoping for the good weather to help his health conditions. However, they were pretty unlucky because it was very rainy and cold in Mallorca through their whole stay, which just made it worse. But in Mallorca, Chopin was very productive and he wrote his preludes there. One of his most famous ones is the Raindrop Prelude. Oh, and by the way, since we're talking about Paris, I'm also coming to Paris. On November 23rd, I'm going to perform all the Chopin etudes at the Salle Cortot in Paris, which is such a big honor because Alfred Cortot was one of the OGs when it came to interpreting Chopin's works. You will find tickets and information also in the link in the description box. I'm also going to play in Würzburg on the 6th of December with a little Christmas special. And also I'm very excited to come to London in January. The ticket sale just started now, so be quick and grab your tickets here. Okay, now back to Chopin. Or actually, back to Beethoven. After Beethoven, the sonata was kind of dead because nobody dared to write something and put the title sonata on top of it. I mean, I can totally understand Beethoven was the absolute goat of composing sonatas. So as soon as you would have dared to compose something in this direction, people would immediately compare you to Beethoven and most probably you would lose. But after some time, the music style evolved more and more into the what we call romantic style nowadays. So with a little bit of distance, composers started to write sonatas again. Also Chopin. His second sonata, Opus 35 in B flat minor, is one of my absolute favorite pieces by Frédéric Chopin. And the third movement of the sonata is the Funeral March, which is super famous. I'm pretty sure that everyone has heard this before. Actually, when I was just a kid, I heard the middle section of this Funeral March. It immediately became my favorite piece. I always wanted to listen to it. The only problem was that I just didn't know to which piece it belongs. Back then, I was binge watching a DVD by Evgeny Kissin, and in the start menu, there was this middle part being played as a background music, and I completely fell in love with it. And I remember that sometimes I was just turning on the TV to just have the menu there and listening to the music. For many years, I actually didn't know to which piece this belongs until my mom accidentally just bumped into a recording by Arthur Rubinstein where he was playing the second sonata, and she was like, oh, I found it. And from that point, there was nothing that I wanted more than playing this sonata by Chopin. Luckily, nowadays it's much easier to find the music that you're searching for, especially when it comes to classical music. If the 8-year-old me had Shazam and Apple Music Classical, I could have probably discovered so much more without years of waiting and searching. Now, this sonata is very special in many different ways, but the last movement, the fourth movement of the sonata, was so much out of the world that Chopin received lots of criticism for it. Robert Schumann was actually one of his biggest admirers, and when he first heard Chopin's playing, he said, chapeau, a genius. But when Schumann heard the last movement of the sonata, he actually said, this is not music. And he didn't mean it in a positive way. I do think that it was very brave and modern what he did there. And nowadays I couldn't really imagine anything else as the final movement of that sonata. But what about you? What do you think about that last movement? Let me know in the comments. As Chopin's health declined, his music reflected more and more the deeper and melancholic mood. In his last years, Chopin returned to